After a long summer break, F1 is finally back with the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, which means that once again it is time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early predictions for the upcoming Grand Prix. Down below, let me know your early predictions for the race in the comments, as I do read and respond to pretty much every single one. Now, let's get to the video. As usual, I'll be talking about McLaren, Ferrari, Aston Martin, Mercedes and Red Bull a little bit later on, so stick around for that. The Belgian Grand Prix at Spa feels like it was a lifetime ago, and finally we are back for the Dutch Grand Prix, and going into this race, the question is, can Max Verstappen equal the record currently held by Sebastian Vettel for the most consecutive F1 victories? Max has won the last 8 races in a row, and in front of his home fans at Zandvoort, he will be looking to make it 9 race wins in a row. The circuit at Zandvoort is a completely different challenge to the challenge at Spa. At the Spa circuit, it was all about high-speed performance with a mixture of very long straights and fast sweeping corners. This meant that the fastest setup was for a lower downforce configuration. However, at Zandvoort, it is all about twists and turns. There are a few heavier braking zones, and the circuit is very narrow, unlike Spa. This means that teams typically run with a fair bit more downforce than they would do at Belgium. There are no real straights long enough for easy overtakes to happen as well, and the main pit straight itself is only just long enough for them to get any real use out of the DRS system. Going into this race, it will be interesting to see what teams have been able to do, if they have been able to find any way to get a one-up on their rivals. It may have been a shutdown, but that doesn't mean that the engineers have not been finding a way to work at their cars to improve overall performance. And we may see a slight shaking up of the order once again, which is something that we have become very used to this season, at least behind Red Bull. Due to the Zandvoort circuit featuring a lot of corners, as well as some high-speed corners, tyres can take an absolute pounding, and because of this, Pirelli have announced that they will be taking the C1, C2 and C3 compound of tyres, which is the hardest in the Pirelli range. This is the same as what they took to last year's Grand Prix, and last year there was a grand total of 56 pit stops, as the majority of drivers opted to do a 3-stop strategy. The third stop was mainly due to a well-timed safety car towards the end of the race, but this just goes to show how difficult the Zandvoort circuit is on tyres, and I reckon it will be likely that once again we will see teams opt to do at least a 2-stop strategy using 2 sets of mediums and 1 set of the hard compound tyres. The tyres are typically punished the hardest around the final banking and also around the corners such as turn 3 and also going into turn 7. Last year we also saw just how important a new set of tyres were when Lewis Hamilton was left out to dry by Mercedes, and instantly as the safety car came back in, he lost out, getting passed by cars who were behind him on much fresher tyres. Even though Hamilton was passed fairly easily at the race restart last year, overtaking at the Zandvoort circuit is very tricky, and in fact it is arguably the hardest normal race circuit on the calendar for on-track overtaking. And you can see that, as last year there was only 23 on-track overtakes during the whole race. And this means that if a driver is going to go for an additional pit stop, they need to make sure they have a big enough of an advantage on new tyres to actually try and attempt an overtake. To help with overtaking, there are 2 DRS zones, one down the main pit straight and one on the run from the exit of turn 11 into the turn 11, turn 12 chicane. But frankly, this second DRS zone does not really do a great deal for overtaking and is used more for getting the cars a little bit closer together to potentially pass down the main pit straight. Last year's pole position lap time was a 1:10.342 by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, and the fastest lap of the race was a 1:13.652, also set by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. Verstappen has simply dominated the 2 races at Zandvoort that there has been so far, so should it be dry, then both of these times could be beaten this year, and probably will be by Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, as he is in incredible form. I just want to say, if you are enjoying the video, I'd greatly appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. I'm on my way now to 3k subs, and I would greatly appreciate it if you help me get there and beyond. Now, let's get back to the video and let's talk about the top 5 teams, and let's start with McLaren. For McLaren, last time out in Belgium, it was a difficult race for the team as they sadly got the setup wrong as they cranked on the downforce and were too slow in a straight line, which you can see when you take a look at any of their fast laps and compare it to any of their rivals. Thankfully though for them, the Dutch Grand Prix should be much better as McLaren's resurgence continues. The circuit should suit them nicely, especially because of how well they did at both Silverstone and Budapest. Zandvoort in a way is a hybrid of these two circuits, as it does have some high-speed elements like Silverstone does, but ultimately it is a tight and twisty circuit like Budapest, and they excelled at both tracks. For Lando Norris, he will be looking to find himself on the podium once again, and Piastri will be looking to bounce back after a difficult race in Belgium, as he failed to finish due to an incident with Carlos Sainz right at the beginning. McLaren don't need to worry also about running too much downforce this weekend, as many of the other teams will likely be running quite a lot of downforce as well, and hopefully they can maximise the potential of their car, and we can maybe see one of them on the podium. For Ferrari, the Belgian Grand Prix went very well, at least for Charles Leclerc, as he was able to score yet another podium result, as the Spa circuit suits the Ferrari nicely. It's becoming more clear now that Ferrari typically prefer higher speed circuits, and because of this, I don't believe that they will be able to perform quite as strongly as Zandvoort. Due to Sainz getting himself involved in an incident with Piastri at the beginning of the race, he managed to miss out on scoring a good number of points, which would have probably seen Ferrari overtake Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari also seemed to, for some reason, struggle when on the hardest tyre in the Pirelli range. I'm not sure why, but they just don't seem to go very well with the C1 tyre, but whenever the C1 is used, well yeah, Ferrari seem to see their pace drop a little. I think this weekend could be a close fight between Ferrari and Aston Martin, and it will be interesting to see if they can get good use out of those tyres, and if they can, they may finally see themselves jump up to third in the Constructors' Championship. For Aston Martin, the Belgian Grand Prix was actually a stronger race than I had feared. Part of the reason for this though was because McLaren had got the setup so badly wrong, and Carlos Sainz knocked himself out of the race before it even got underway. But even so, Fernando Alonso was able to capitalise on all of this, and he found himself finishing the race in the top 5. The Dutch Grand Prix should be a race that suits them better. However, I cannot help but feel like they will be finishing at best in 5th place with Fernando Alonso due to Aston Martin falling behind McLaren and also Mercedes in the development race, and Ferrari have also closed the gap to them. They will probably be fighting with that Ferrari team, but I do think Alonso can possibly beat both Leclerc and Sainz. For Stroll, it will be a battle to finish in the points, but if he has a very good race and a very good weekend, then I do think it will be possible for the Canadian driver to score some much needed points in his championship fight. Mercedes perhaps struggled more at the Belgian Grand Prix than some had predicted. Russell was lacking pace and confidence pretty much the whole weekend, and Hamilton just was not able to live with the pace of the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. The Dutch Grand Prix should be a race which sees the team go much better, as they should be able to battle with McLaren for best of the rest, and potentially, if last year was anything to go by, we could see Mercedes take the fight to one of the Red Bulls as well, depending how the strategy goes. Mercedes have been fairly aggressive with strategy in the last few races, and have pushed the tyres a long way into the races. This tyre management could play into their hands this weekend if tyre wear is going to be high, and with that in mind, we could see them potentially being one of the few teams who go for a one-stop strategy as opposed to the two-stop, and we might see that work out just about perfectly for them, and of course if there is a well-timed safety car, then they could find themselves in the pound seat for a good position on the podium. And finally for Red Bull, the Dutch Grand Prix should be another walk in the park. Verstappen is in unbelievable form and is now only one race away from matching Sebastian Vettel's all-time consecutive race victories. And let's be honest, no one is likely to stop him from matching that record this weekend, especially in front of his home fans. For Sergio Perez this weekend, he needs to ensure he can get qualifying right, because if he makes a mistake over one lap, then it could be a very long race for the Mexican driver as he tries to potentially pick his way through the field. In Spa, Perez was helped by the fact that the Spa circuit is so long that he can absolutely maximise the Red Bull. But because the Zandvoort circuit is tight, twisty and short, he doesn't really have any margin to make any mistakes. So he needs to make sure he gets a good qualifying, because if he is further down, it's going to be difficult for him to finish on the podium just because of how the Zandvoort circuit is. So with that in mind then, what are my predictions for the Dutch Grand Prix? Well, for qualifying it has to be another Max Verstappen pole position, as he will not want to let the Dutch fans down. But what about the race as well? Well, in P5, I'm going to say it will be Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin, P4 will be Sergio Perez, P3 will be Lewis Hamilton, Lando Norris will finish in second place, and yes, Max Verstappen will win the Dutch Grand Prix, and he will tie the all-time record for consecutive race wins with Sebastian Vettel. And Esteban Ocon will be the top midfield driver. But those are my thoughts. The question is though, what are your predictions? In the comment section down below, let me know. And as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.